Joining us now for more on this solar canopy mix-up is resident Janine Joyner, Venice Mayor John Hollick, and our own reporter Christopher Brantley. Now, Florida Power and Light declined our request to come on the show tonight, but they did send us a statement the past hour. It said, in part, "We are very disappointed that we were just a few feet off and the City Council turned its back on this project and solar energy. We will respect the Council's orders and work out a schedule to remove the structure and relocate it outside the city of Venice." Anything a surprise there in that statement at all, John?
That last sentence, that's the first I've heard of that. Last night at the meeting when the vote was taken to remove the structure from its current location, we knew that it could be one of three things. They could take the structure totally away from the city, they could relocate it somewhere else in the city, or they could relocate it to the original area that was approved in the lease. So now it looks like Florida Power and Light has made a decision to move it outside the city.
Is that your biggest fear?
Well, I think the biggest fear was that they would move it back to the original location and we would start all over again. We didn't want people within the city to be upset. We thought this is one of those things where no good deed goes unpunished.
Right.
We thought we were doing something good and found out that the people in the area really didn't care for the structure. So if they would have moved it back to the original area, I think we would have just started the whole process over again.
How long did it take to build the structure?
Oh, goodness.
Ballpark figure. Weeks, months?
Months. It was months.
And nobody realized it until it was complete that it was in the wrong spot?
Well, I want to cut in if I could. It was months in the making, but we went out there when it was actually being built, when ground was being broken, and it was only over the course of a couple days that it went from nothing was there to a whole structure being built.
Went up fast?
We went up. The process took months, as you said, but I mean the structure itself was built very quickly.
Are you saying they realized midway through the construction and kept going?
Yeah, well, no, they pretty much stopped after our interview with city engineer Kathleen Whedon. She came out, saw that there was a problem, and put halt on the construction very quickly after that. In fact, you'll see right now it's pretty much built, but it doesn't have any of the electrical hooked up. There's no solar panels on it.
Janine, let's get you on the record now. How do you feel about all this?
Well, I'm glad to hear, sadly, though, I'm glad to hear that FPL is just going to remove it from the city altogether. But I am sad about that because the citizens of Venice were not against having a solar panel or canopy on the island. We just did not want that specific location. And we had been informed that the city had a choice of 5 different locations, of which that area was one. So if they had chosen one, for instance, in Centennial Park, although I would have probably fought that one too, because that's such a wonderful family area. But the airport was a location that we understand, and then possibly one of the ball fields. So had they put them in one of those locations and not right there on the cultural campus, which is a historical area for us and so close to residents, then we wouldn't be here today.
Well, now a solar panel is a cutting-edge idea. It's not that unsightly, is it? Is it kind of a neat thing for the city to have?
It can be. When your whole architecture is Venetian, Italian, Tuscany, and then you saw the picture, you have this metal structure that looks like a Wawa gas station or an airport parking lot for rentals. It just doesn't fit.
Okay, let's get back to the topic exactly, the fact it was put in the wrong spot. Mayor, did you initially vote in favor of this?
I did. Initially, when the initial conversations came about, we gave a suggestion of putting this shelter, this canopy, out toward the beach. It seemed to be a natural place to get shade where cars are parking during the day. But because of coastal setbacks and the permitting process, that couldn't be done. So it went to staff and to Florida Power and Light, and they did come up with 5 different locations, and it was up to staff to come to the council with which was the best location that the panel should be put in, and that was the location at the Civic Center, at the Community Center.
And the panel would have perhaps saved energy and saved money for Venice?
We would have been paid an annual rent, but it wasn't on the electricity sharing program that FPL has with normal solar panels, because they did the entire construction cost. There was no charge at all to the city. All we did was provide the location. They were paying us an annual rent for the location, and they were feeding all the energy back into the system.
Do you ever recall a situation like this in your career before where something was built in the wrong spot?
I heard of situations like that where roofs were taken off of wrong houses, or someone put a garage on the wrong side of a house, but never one like this where an entire structure, someone turned a blueprint upside down and built the structure one whole location off.
Whoops.
I'll get your first reaction when you saw that next, but first let's take a brief break. Welcome back. We're talking tonight about a solar canopy built in the wrong spot, and now it has to be taken down, and it won't be rebuilt there at all. In fact, we found out just before the show began that FPL will not rebuild it in Venice. Our guest tonight, Venice resident Janine Joyner, Venice Mayor John Hollick, and reporter Christopher Brantley. And Christopher, residents didn't like this thing even where it was supposed to be, right?
No, several of the residents, the man who lives directly across the street and a couple doors down, they all have a good view of this structure. None of them seem to like it at all. They didn't want it at all in this parking lot. They were especially peeved by it being built closer to their homes. Again, when it was built, 30 feet in the wrong direction, it would have been farther away. It'd have been a little bit more difficult to see, especially if there were a little bit higher vegetation, but they were not happy.
They thought it was unsightly?
They thought it was unsightly, yes. He said that he's owned his home for something like, I think he said 33 years. And he said he likes having a view of the park, having a view of the community center. He said this structure just didn't fit into the environment.
And this is in the exact same area where the library was closed.
Absolutely, just within eyesight, really, of the now former Venice Public Library, and could be the new public library, perhaps on that same cultural campus, which is a large place with the several different buildings. But yeah, it's a historic place.
So City Council last night voted 5-2 until, what, 1 o'clock in the morning, Mayor?
We were there until 1:45 a.m.
45. And you were among the two that said, let's leave it where it is.
I was.
Why did you prefer to do that?
Well, there were the three possibilities that FPL had: moving it from that location to the original location, leaving it where it is, or totally moving it off the cultural campus. We had a signed lease with FPL that said you may build it at this location 30 feet from where it was, and I just felt that it's still in the same parking lot. It was an error, but it wasn't an egregious error, that to leave it where it was probably the best solution.
One resident said you knuckled to big business with this decision last night, you personally.
Well, I don't think I knuckled to big business. I think I tried to use some common sense logic on it, that if they were only going to move it 30 feet, the residents would still be disappointed, very disappointed with that location. Plus, if they did move it 30 feet, it would have been twice the size that it is now. They only did half the structure. So I was just I figured that it was a bad decision on a contractor's part, but it wasn't something that couldn't be remedied by a change in the lease.
And when we read FP&L's statement before the show that they're going to rebuild this outside the city limits, what emotion do you feel about that?
Well, I'm sorry about that. I think that we have been trying to promote alternative forms of energy for the last 6 years that I've been in office, and we just never had the money to do it. This was the first time that we actually had a structure built in the city, and it didn't take our dollars. All it took was our location. So I was very happy that the structure was there, and it's unfortunate that it won't be there at all.
Christopher?
I have a curiosity. We talked about, Mr. Mayor, we talked about those private meetings that were requested by FPL. In those private meetings, and I understand, as we said in the story, there was no record of them, but was there any conversation by FPL and you about maybe removing this and scrapping the idea of having it in the community center and putting it somewhere like Wellfield Park or any of those other places, the airport, for any of them?
Now, in the private meetings, we've looked at the other locations, and none of them are satisfactory. So it was mostly a conversation of, we can leave it where it is or move it to the spot that was originally selected, the original lease spot, which to me, didn't make, it wouldn't have solved the problem of the residents that were there that didn't like the structure.
If you could, because I know when I was out there again today talking to some of the residents, getting prepared for this story, a lot of them were still angling about that whole, there were private meetings held. Could you give us some sort of insight what might have been said in those meetings?
I just did. They were very short. It was a 10, 15-minute meeting, and it was, we looked at the other locations, and we didn't see anything that would be a suitable location. About the only thing we're going to look at from this point on is whether, if it's not approved to stay where it is, we will look at the original lease location again.
All right, we're talking about the canopy and the solar canopy in Venice that was built in the wrong location, and last night the city council voted to take it down. FP&L said, thank you for that. We will go elsewhere and not rebuild in Venice. Now, Janine, you also have said that the city put the cart before the horse in all this. How do you mean?
It's our understanding as citizens that when the city is considering constructing something or making a deal with a corporation like FPL that would involve public property, that they are required to notify neighbors within 250 feet of the structure. When the FPL approached the city in September 2015, and there was a public hearing about it, none of the citizens, local citizens, received a letter. So the city approved this lease, not knowing where the location was yet at that point, but they approved a lease with FPL without citizen input. So that was the first mistake.
John, is that true?
Well, we were told that a letter was sent out. Something happened, and that's going to be a difficult one to trace down because they were not registered letters. We were told that the citizens were notified. The citizens said that they didn't receive a letter. I have to trust what the citizens said. Somehow we have to do a better job of communicating.
So then it goes to the Architectural Review Board. And again, they are required to have a public hearing and send out notices a second time. A second time, 250 feet people were not notified. And no letter was sent out, or none were received. I'm not going to say they weren't sent out because, again, like he said, according to Kathleen Whedon, she has a chart that says, yes, they were sent out, but nobody received them. So, but they are also required to post a prominent a notice in front of the site. That wasn't done either. So it's not just the letters. They didn't put up a sign either. And so if these things had been done, and the public had a chance to say, gee, yes, we are pro-solar. We would love to have this program participate, but we don't want it there. We just want it in a different location.
John, in our final 30 seconds, Mr. Mayor, the contractor seems to be skidding off scot-free here. You naming the contractor, and any repercussions for that contractor that put the thing in the wrong place?
It wasn't the city's contractor, so that's between the FPL and the contractor. I don't know if the contractor will get off scot-free. I would imagine that there's going to be some repercussions to him, but it'll be through FPL.
It's $160,000 to move it. So good thing to remember. So whatever they have to do at this point, the structure's got to come down. It's a good chunk of change.
It might come to Sarasota next for all we know.
It might.
Could be.
We'll have some final thoughts from our guests after this break. Please stay with us. A contractor's mistake left a solar panel canopy, and a big one, in the wrong area, and now it has to come down in Venice, and it's not going to come back, FPL told us tonight. Now some final thoughts, first off from Mayor John Holick. What lessons have been learned by the city of Venice in all this?
Well, apparently the system that we have to notify people is inadequate. So we're going to have to do work on that and make sure that people are notified. Whether that means hand delivering to the people that are in the area, it would have been very easy to take a letter and put it in 10 or 15 different mailboxes or doors to notify them. And I did see a copy of the letter. I didn't see it prior to tonight, but the letter was pretty ambiguous. You'd really have to know what they were talking about to know that this is going to be a solar panel that I'm going to see from my house. So we learned.
Are you frustrated that somebody else made a mistake, the contractor, and the city of Venice gets the bad name?
I'm used to it. I don't think you take a public office and figure you're going to walk away without blame on something. So And I'm fine with that. We'll do better next time.
Janine, final thoughts.
The reason that I think that I was so upset is that I was very involved when the library was shut down. And I remember talking with John Hollick many, many times, Mayor Hollick, excuse me, and he himself was absolutely devastated to find out 24 hours in advance that the library was going to be closed by the county. So when this issue came up, and then for the citizens to be left out again, it's like deja vu all over again.
Right.
And so we really were angry.
Christopher, closing thoughts?
You know, the first time I went out there to do a story on all of this, the residents out there seemed to be pretty happy. You know, the residents didn't really want to talk about it, but the people in the parking lot visiting the temporary library right there at the community center, they seemed to be pretty happy about it. They thought this was a good project. It didn't seem to me like everybody turned their backs on it until it was revealed that it was built in the wrong location. And if I could point to Mayor Hollick for just a moment to clarify, the original sketch that you were given, was that different or was that the same as the structure that was built?
The original sketch that we saw was more like on a postcard version, and it would be very hard to take that picture and say this is what it's going to look like, just as it would be to look at the structure that is there right now and say this is what the finished product is going to look like. The finished product would not look the same as it is during construction.
So even if the residents had gotten that postcard of it and looked at it and said, yeah, well, that's okay, at the time, if that is what has happened, they still could be coming forth and saying at this point, this isn't what we
No, if
agreed
they would
on.
have seen that postcard, they would have said this is a nice structure.
The wrong spot is the wrong spot. Before we go, some comments now on tonight's lead story about voter registration being extended in Florida. A federal judge agreed with the state Democratic Party that the hurricane interruption deserved a delayed deadline for registration. Here's what some of our viewers are saying about the extra days. Mike Barbario writes, I would say I'd gather all my Republican friends and make sure they're registered, but obviously they already are. Turn Florida red again. Tony Viscardi writes, if you need to be reminded to register to vote at this point in your life, you're either clueless, lazy, or being bribed. Mike Hood writes, voter registration shouldn't be a political subject. There was a hurricane. Just do the right thing without being forced to by a court. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. And Amy Lynn writes, this should only be available if you live in the counties with significant power outages and flooding. For more on tonight's topic, go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. Well, thank you three for being here. Enjoyed talking to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Up next, we'll have more on the forecast and also your primetime headlines. Stay right there.